Welcome to the LowCarbMD Podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope.
As we have always said, we are bringing you medical information and cutting-edge science, but none of this is medical advice. Please seek out input from your own doctor.
Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. And you know what? Let's do this for the LowCarbMD podcast. I want to get this on both platforms because I just want to get attention to Grace Price. Welcome as our guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Gosh, you're kind of a phenom to me. I'm looking at you going, oh my gosh, like, are you still 17?
I'm 18 now.
Okay, 18 now. Okay, that's not so bad. You're a whole 18. Now you're getting a lot older. But gosh, I just watched this documentary. It's so great. It's called Cancer, a Food-Borne Illness. And gosh, it's what you've done. You've interviewed some of the best out there. And so let's start. Let's go all the way back. How did you, what made you get started looking into nutrition, health? You know, I know your grandfather passed away of cancer, right?
Yeah, no, if I really go super far back, it all started with me just having a ton of questions about the way that chronic diseases are treated in our current standard medicine system of today. And so I think my dad would probably say I'm not the type of person who just accepts no as an answer. And so when I was asking these questions, so could I possibly prevent cancer through anything in my lifestyle, all these kinds of things, people just kept saying to me no, it's a genetic disease, it's out of control, all these things. And I was like, okay, well, that doesn't help me at all. And I just, if I'm being quite honest, I didn't really believe them. I was like, there must be more to this. And I kind of had that suspicion for a lot of chronic diseases as well, not just cancer. It felt as though that was kind of the main answer everyone was giving me that was hiding kind of a deeper root cause issue. Because these diseases I had seen amongst my friends, amongst my parents and adults who I know in my life. Declining health is something we're all struggling with, and it's bad now, worse than it's arguably ever been, specifically with these chronic diseases. So I really, really felt very passionate about just looking into this. So it was kind of a new experience for me, just kind of diving headfirst into something that I had never familiarized myself with, other than the fact that my parents were very health aware when I was younger. So they showed me, I talk about this in my documentary, but they showed me a lot of films, one of them being Fed Up, where it talks about sugar and sugar's impact on obesity. And so I was aware that there was sugar in the foods that we were eating. And I liked to read nutritional labels as well for fun, which was a little weird. And so I was like, okay, maybe I can put this to good use. So
Yeah, at your age, thinking about these things, I had zero clue about any of this stuff. And you're right. And the same thing goes with diabetes and obesity. People, doctors just say, well, that's just genetic and you're just going to get a tough luck type thing. You go, there's nothing I can do to prevent it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it feels kind of just like it. Honestly, what I started to realize is it felt as though that was an answer that people were giving because they almost had less incentive to share another answer that might actually be more beneficial to people, or at least the people who had the most money in this situation weren't prioritizing that message. So yeah.
Yeah, and then we have to make lifestyle changes if we know that these things are affecting it. It's not just like Russian roulette type thing. It's like when you realize, oh, if I eat these bad foods, it can affect my health outcomes. And now there's so much coming out with mental health and diabetes and metabolic health
Yep.
and cancer,
Yep. No, exactly.
So did you make them crazy in school? Or did they encourage you to ask questions? Because a lot of times I see in a lot of schools, it's just memorization, med school especially, where it's just memorization. You just learn and you spit back what they tell you. And when you start saying, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense, then it becomes an issue. Has that been an issue, or have your teachers been pretty helpful in getting you?
I actually go to a very different school. It's called Alpha and it's in Austin. And I joined the school when I was in 5th grade. So I used to go to public school, but then I came here, and Alpha is honestly, I give all of the credit to them when it comes to me being able to even produce my documentary and do all the things that I've been able to do today. They basically have taught all of the students that we are completely limitless by giving us a ton of time in the afternoons, if you're in the high school program, to work on a super ambitious world-class level project. And so because we also do learning without teachers on AI apps in the morning. So they're very adaptive and we're all able to learn twice as fast as the average public school student. We then have this time in the afternoon to do these crazy projects. So I decided freshman year that I wanted to, basically I was like, I want to try to see if I can find a cure for cancer or a way to prevent cancer at least. And it sounds kind of cliche, but I was like, why not? You know, that's kind of something that I'm very interested in. And so I talked to the head of our kind of program for this at our school, and she was like, yeah, sounds good. What are you going to do to distribute it? And so it was really, really unique experience that I had, but it was 100% worth it and why I'm able to be where I am today.
And is your school mostly for the arts, or is it anything? Is it like
anything? So
wow.
yeah, so it's basically the way that the model was based off of is that Olympians are able to, accomplish something that gives them basically a 75% chance of getting into any top college that they want to get into. They stand out amongst all these other applicants who are super well-rounded. And so in the high school, we're not all athletes. And so for students who aren't going to be an athlete, you can also just do an Olympic equivalent project. And that gives you the same chances of kind of having that similar success. And so one example is my sister's creating a Broadway musical for teens by teens. And so she's going to do a reading for that in New York soon. Another one of our really good friends is creating an online teen dating app that is safe because she has been giving relationship advice to her friends and loves to help others and decided she also wanted to make money. And so she started building that and putting that out there. Another one of my friends has a newsletter that's amazing on alternative education. So wide variety of projects here.
Man, do you think this is the way forward for education then?
I totally think so.
Yeah, because a lot of us are so afraid of AI. So for us old people, like, how does the AI help you? Like, you're getting education through, like, you start asking questions and you get responses back, or how does that AI work? I know I saw you said you only were in school for like 2 hours a day, and the rest you're doing stuff you need other things to do, like making movies that change the world and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, the AI is a personalized teacher / tutor, whatever you want to call it, that basically does its job better than a lot of people who are supposed to be teaching because it's just one-on-one and it can give it to you in any way that makes the most sense for you. So, I mean, super adaptive, very helpful. And at our school, I know AI is very controversial in school settings because teachers are fearful that it's going to cause students to cheat or something like that. But at Alpha, we're told that if we're not using AI, we're falling behind. And that's honestly kind of the truth when you look at AI and its trajectory for the future. I mean, if we don't start learning how to use it, then we're not going to know how when that starts to replace a lot of super common jobs. So it's preparing us to be able to bring our knowledge in how to properly use AI to whatever field we end up going into as adults.
Did AI help you in making this movie?
Totally. Yeah, I didn't know how to make a documentary. I had to learn a lot from AI and obviously other research tools as well, but it's all of it helps. So yeah, huge help.
Where do you get your boldness from?
I would also say probably, I guess I can give a little bit of credit to my parents, but also my school has helped a ton with that too. I mean, I had to give public speeches as like a 6th grader in front of all of my peers. I actually gave one on how much sugar is in Coca-Cola when I was in 6th grade. And I went up and measured it in front of everyone and everyone hated me. They were like, what is she doing? This is our favorite drink. You're kidding me, Grace. And I was like, hey guys, I'm just the deliverer.
I'm just the messenger here. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what, my
exactly.
pages look at me too. Like, what do you mean bread has sugar in it? It does. What about this? Yeah, it does too.
It
And
does.
it's hard because
Exactly. No one wants to hear it. Yeah.
it's hard. Yeah, and it's hard because then we have to make that decision ourselves and go, okay, I'm not going to eat certain things. And like you went through how they bleach the flour and all that with Clorox, bleach
Oh,
gas and stuff. It's like,
it's
wow.
ridiculous. Yeah. It's like, what? How is this legal? Yeah.
Yeah, and when I asked you about your boldness at the very beginning of the documentary, everyone, by the way, go watch this. It's definitely worth your time. It was amazing. I was actually surprised, like, oh, I'll just watch it and see. But I was like, man, this is pretty dang good. At the beginning, you're in front of a food company and you want to ask people questions and no one really wanted to talk to you.
Yeah. No, I went up to so many people. Those were just the two that we caught on camera. And every single time the employees had no interest. And I was asking them pretty simple questions. I mean, if you work for one of these fast food companies or stuff like that, and you're in a higher up position, you would expect that they'd at least be willing to kind of interact with I'm a kid. I'm not like an adult coming after them being like, hey, you are ruining our entire country, even though, I mean, they are in a sense. But I was just like, hey, I'm a teen. I was curious if you're aware that your foods are poisoning my generation. And no response every single time. And then I ended up getting kicked out. But it was a great experience because it just goes to show that, I mean, no one is really willing to talk about this right now. So it's something that we need to force into the mainstream conversation.
Yeah, and you jumped into like, who's funding the ADA, all these things we've been kind of seeing and talking about. And you go, gosh, they're supposed to be our advocates for people with diabetes or
Yeah.
heart disease. And you look at where their funding is coming from, and even if there's nothing bad going on, you're like, at least it's a a perception of money talks basically.
Precisely. And if you're accepting a $1.9 million fund from Coca-Cola or these other big food conglomerates, it still affects you. Even if you say, oh, we're trying not to be biased, it definitely has an effect. And so it's like, it's just unethical. But I was shocked when I learned these kinds of things that are most well-respected national health organizations were accepting funds from these places that have showed very strong ties to the very foods that are causing these diseases they're trying to prevent. So it's crazy to me. It's very backwards.
It is wild, and I didn't even realize that Coke was donating money to the American Cancer Society and all these kind of things. And you go,
Yeah.
man, like when you're donating money, there's a reason for that, right? It's not just out of the kindness of your heart to find the cure. It's like saying, okay, we're going to tell you what to say to educate people and say,
Exactly.
just do it in moderation. It's fine. Eat all
Yep.
this terrible
Yep.
stuff, and instead of saying, this is just not good.
Exactly. And the whole idea of saying things are okay in moderation too is the biggest excuse I've ever heard to just eat more of the addictive, poisonous foods.
Well, and that's the problem is no one says, hey, if you're an alcoholic, just drink in moderation, because you
No,
can't.
no one says that.
And
Exactly.
that's what we're
Or,
dealing with is, and the kids,
yeah,
like we grow up and, even during COVID, I noticed a lot of the adults, they were going back to eating their Honey Nut Cheerios and Lucky Charms. And you even
totally.
talk about that in the movie,
Yeah.
and you go, that's probably not the best coping mechanism because they remember they ate their cereal in the morning and watched cartoons and everything was calm and peaceful. They didn't have to make life decisions at that time.
Exactly. Even smoking. And that's why in my documentary, I really tried to highlight that ultra processed foods, with chemical additives, preservatives, excessive amounts of refined sugars and seed oils, even all these different things that we're researching in nutrition right now, those foods are honestly the new version of cigarettes when it comes to cancer and these other diseases, but we don't have the same kind of stigma around them yet. And so people think it's fine in moderation. They think it's all a balancing act. But just as you said with alcohol, no one would ever say to a smoker, it's totally fine if you're balancing the cigarettes with also, you're getting some good sleep. It's okay to do it all. No one does that because everyone knows, no, cigarettes have a clear link to cancer. And it's just true. And most people wouldn't argue with that.
And you also talked about epigenetics. I was like, wow, like I had never even heard of epigenetics. I was probably 46 years old or something. And so it sounds like your dad has some background maybe in nutrition or understanding life, or was it just something he became interested in, and then he passed that along to you?
Yeah, honestly, it's very funny that you said that because my dad, so he graduated with his degree in engineering and computer software, but he is the best researcher I've ever met. And so he's really inspired me to dive deeper than I've ever thought. He's the kind of dad where I bring him one thing and he's like, you didn't go deep enough. And he tells me what he's learned. And I'm like, okay, I'll go back to it and keep reading more and more. And so he's always been reading these health books and keeping up with the latest trends. And same with my mom, except my mom's a little bit more into the fitness side of all of it. But they both have kind of influenced me on a super deep level when it's come to that. And once my dad told me about epigenetics and I read the books, he's always handing me stuff to read, I just was mind blown because it kind of satisfied also a suspicion that I had. Because in high school, in your typical biology class, I had taken AP biology the year before, and they were like, it's all about DNA. This is the most important thing. It's what's causing a lot of these diseases. They gave me the typical somatic mutation theory around the origin of cancer, all these kinds of things. They explain these to you and you're like, this is just the way it is. But epigenetics was like, well, no, there's actually a huge impact that our lifestyle has on the smallest thing in our cells by causing certain genes to be either expressed or suppressed, which totally fascinated me. And especially the fact that food has been shown to have a huge connection to this through all of these different pathways. So yeah, it was very interesting to me.
Yeah, and stress and sleep and smoking, all these other
Yep.
factors have a huge role in what we're getting. And like Callie Means was talking about on your documentary, was like, you don't wait till someone blows up your engine and then say,
No,
okay, we should change the oil now.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we
No.
put all of our money into treatment rather than prevention. And that's what's crazy about medicine. Everywhere you look, doctors say we're into preventive medicine, but you look and like, are you? Because
Are
you're
you?
not even checking the important factors that really have to do with like metabolic health, right? And we get back to the mitochondria, and that was a good part of your show too, is talking about the seed oils and all these other factors that we don't think about. And me being in the low carb community, a lot of times they'll say there's a keto food, and you look at it as like, oh, it's all these bad oils in it. That's not keto at all.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Even the keto foods. It's crazy too, because I've observed that doctors, like you said, when they say that they're being preventative, in their minds, that's basically saying, okay, you have pre-diabetes. And that's not helpful at all. Pre-diabetes is almost on the verge of diabetes. It's not like there's a magical switch when you get over to diabetes. You're at just a less intense poor metabolic health state, and you need to reverse that. And so it's like, it's not working. We need to fix it somehow.
Yeah, and one of our best markers for that is a fasting insulin to see, are you getting pre-diabetic or your insulin's going up? Because that 3-month sugar average could stay for a long time, and that's an arbitrary cutoff that we use.
Yep.
I'm talking to someone who knows more about this stuff than me. It's starting to scare me. What's going to happen when you're my age? Holy cow! No, but that's the exciting thing, is that when young people get it and they go, okay, let me look into this. And one of the things I've hated over the last 4 years or so is so many times I see the media saying, don't do your own research, it's dangerous, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, it's ridiculous. That's one of the reasons why I recently committed to a brand new school for college that opened in Austin called University of Austin, Texas, and they're committed to basically preserving freedom of speech, freedom of thought, and the pursuit of truth. And so I was so excited to go there because I've been told by all these people, they're like, don't trust the science, all these kinds of, or trust the science. It's like, there's these conflicting viewpoints where they're like, you can research this, but you can't research this. And I'm like, why can't we just see it all and then weigh whatever seems to be a common thread through it? And so I think that going to this new school will be really awesome to continue to push me towards that, because that is definitely what I just want to try to find some sort of consensus,
That's so critical. I'm so glad you bring that up, because censorship becomes a big issue. And medicine's been a huge issue, because if you question stuff, you go, I don't think we're managing diabetes right. And they go, you're fanatical, you're on the fringe. It's like, well, what you're doing is not working. So we got to look at the whole picture, right? So what's the problem up here? Like in a trial, they don't say we're only going to hear the prosecution side because the other side's going to hurt your feelings. And you go, hey, we'll put all the evidence out there and let me decide, right? We're the jury.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I released the documentary on X, because I was super concerned that if I released it on other platforms, I'd totally get censored, or people would be like, this is, where they put the little tagline and they're like, disclaimer, this is nutritional misinformation or something. And I think that Elon's done a great job of creating a platform that people seriously feel comfortable just sharing things that they've learned on. And of course, none of us are always going to be right all the time. I love all of the feedback that I get on X as well, and I think it's great, but that's the only way we can actually improve and learn something, if we get that kind of feedback.
Have you had hard feedback?
I've definitely gotten some, and a lot of it I think is great too. I mean, I always like to take it and respond, especially in DMs. I've gotten some hate too, but most of the time it's comments like, oh, your eyebrows are stupid or something.
Yeah, something, of course. Yeah, stuff like that has nothing to do with the content, and that's such a sign of the times. And I've seen that so much. I see someone lose 100 pounds, and the people go, "Look at all that loose skin." It's like they lost 100 pounds.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
really,
Like,
that's what you're going to point out right now.
But that may be a mindset of people are just so negative and beat down, and they think everyone, I don't know. I don't know why the nastiness is out there, but it is.
It is. Yeah. It's very strange, but
most people like yourself who are creating and you're doing stuff with your life, you don't really have to tear down other people. You do what you do.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So what was the hardest part about making this documentary? Was there something that was the most challenging to you?
I'd probably say the editing process, just because I've never done it before. And I'm sure any kind of filmmaker could also agree with me that when you get in the last stages of editing, it's just, it's so brutal, because you're trying to rethink things and you're like, does this flow right? And the minute you cut one thing out, it offsets the entire film. So then you got to readjust again. And I mean, the film used to be around like 40 minutes and I cut it down to 23. So
Wow.
I'm very happy with where it is now. And I think that we just kept all the most important, exciting parts that are in there. And that's kind of where I wanted it to be. But I learned so much from the whole process. And I think that just the skill set of being able to produce a film is like super important, because I would totally create another documentary on another deep dive that I do later in life. So
do you have anything on your radar that's your next topic that you want to talk about, or is this kind of your topic, or what do you think?
I mean, I think right now I feel very lucky, because I feel as though this is kind of what I want to continue to pursue, at least throughout college and into most of my adulthood, because I feel very committed to the issue itself and specifically advocating for my generation. I just think when I see what kids are eating every day, it makes me feel so frustrated, because I know that, one, most of the time they're not as aware, and two, they're the number one targets of all of these big food conglomerates, because they're the ones who are buying all of this crap and they're okay with it. And it's like a trend to go get this stuff. It's a trend to go get your Starbucks in the morning. It's a trend to, have your favorite chips after school, go to the vending machine. Everything that you're served at school is awful and completely controlled just by the FDA. And so it's like, all of this stuff, it really, really bothers me. And I don't think that I'm ever going to really be able to sit still knowing that that is going on and I could do something about it. So I'm going to just continue to advocate for teens. I do plan on creating, these are kind of ideas that I've been playing around with, but creating some kind of global competition and incentivize teens to basically reduce their sugar intake. Because for me, when I just see sugar, that's kind of the number one thing. Sugar and fast food, of course, you got all the bad oils, and also you have a lot of bad dyes and chemical additives in that as well. But with sugar, I mean, we've seen with cancer, from all the way from Otto Warburg's work to Seyfried's work today, there's a clear connection. And whether it's even just glucose through driving hyperinsulinemia, and all of these other kind of factors that then lead to cancer proliferation, or fructose, which we've seen a lot of studies now leads to metastases. either directly through the same hyperinsulinemia or indirectly just through creating energy imbalances in the cell because it depletes ATP. It's like there's such a clear connection that I'm like, I have to keep going after this. And my friends and I used to eat so much sugar. And I'm telling you, Brian, I really did not understand how deep the effect was. I thought maybe, it would cause me to gain a little bit of weight. Maybe it would give me some acne, but getting kids to realize that this is going to cause you to die early, to be miserable for most of the later years of your life, and like even worse than their grandparents. And teens, when I share that with my friends, they get really freaked out because they've seen how sick their grandparents were in the last stages of their life. And they're like, I don't want to be like that. And with the current stats, it's looking like we're going to be like that even younger. So it's an urgent issue, and I'm just going to keep going after it.
Yeah, you've been talking about that, the chronic disease we're seeing in younger and younger people, and I'm seeing people
Yeah,
come in with stuff and you go, wow, this is like, I didn't see this until people were 80, or 60
exactly.
before. Now they're like in
Yeah.
their 30s and 20s.
No, it's crazy. Even, early onset cancer, it risen by 80% in the past 3 decades. So people under the age of 50. And I don't think people also comprehend that this is young adults. Like these are literally kids in college who are getting diagnosed with colon cancer, pancreatic cancer. And you're like, what is going on? And I think it's also very interesting that no one likes to point out that the cancers that are being diagnosed in these people at younger ages are cancers that we've also done a lot of research that are connected to chronic inflammation, the gut microbiome, all these things that we've seen ties with food. It's just, it all seems to work together in my mind from the stuff that I've read. And so I'm like, how do we get more people talking about this? Because it needs to be talked about.
It is an amazing thing how, things that you're looking at are things that I never, like for years and years and never even thought about, the gut microbiome, leaky gut, all these things, and the association
Yeah.
with autoimmune disease and inflammation. And so I actually gave a talk on low carb stuff, but then 2 minutes of it, I talked about how this can affect the gut microbiome. And I had a well-known doctor come up to me and go, Brian, you can't talk about this stuff. There's no science behind it. And I was like, wait a minute. I read 60 studies,
Wow.
60,
Yes.
60
Yeah.
studies just looking at this. And like you're saying, I mean, I was laughing when you were talking about it, because if I give a talk, if I'm talking about sleep deprivation, the effects on physiology or something like that,
Yeah.
or on insulin, those kind of things. And there's so much information, and having to edit it down, go, okay, I'm not going to talk. This is a great study, but I can't, because I can't get into a 45-minute talk, And so sometimes when you have to edit things down, it's so hard to go, oh, this is such an important point, but okay, this is more important. And when you have to weigh those things down and whittle it down to where people can focus for, 45
Yeah.
minutes or so.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's like, how do we even get people to listen to the message? Because a lot of it, I think that what's tough too is when people hear the current nutritional information, they get really confused and don't really like to interact with it because there's just so much conflicting stuff in it. 'Cause you have what these big health organizations are incentivized to say and what a lot of the health information has been for the past 50 years. I mean, we saw that literally the earliest form of the sugar industry funded studies and Harvard professors to go and blame fat and cholesterol as the number one cause of coronary heart disease instead of sugar because they knew that that was going to decrease their sales. So that's something we've believed for the past 50 years. And so you have that versus people saying, go on the ketogenic diet, sugar is bad, low carb is how, you can actually improve your health. So they're like, what is happening? And it's so hard to fight against those two, but it's like, we have to figure out a way to somehow rise above what everyone believes and doesn't even know why they believe it.
Well, that's such a huge point, is saying, okay, look, let's figure this out, because there's different thoughts of how you do it. And since your brain is better than mine, probably, you start thinking about, how do we best do that? Is it educating the people and the young people now, and just going, look, here's what's going to happen down the road? Or is it, a lot of like Dr. Lustig, who was the first one I heard talking about fructose,
Yeah,
saying, hey, he wants to tax it. And you go, okay, then they're going to say, okay, meat's bad for you. We're going to tax meat. We're going to tax eggs because there's cholesterol. And we're going to tax. So then we just tax everything, and you still don't make any
exactly.
progress. And you go, okay, how do we be reasonable about it? Like, we all want to be healthy. So you go, what's my best way of achieving that?
Yeah. No, totally. And it's like, if you don't change the main health narrative, then like you said, they're just going to start applying the same thing to these other foods that we're like, we do not want that. We want more eggs. We want all of these kinds of animal fats and meats and proteins. It's like, we need that. So yeah, I mean, I really think it comes down to simplifying the message and meeting people where they're at too, not coming off as, I mean, one thing that I have really been looking into recently is the teen obesity epidemic we've kind of been having in our country. And it's hard to talk about, especially just in social situations, because obesity is such a controversial topic right now because people are trying to normalize it. They're trying to say that, it's offensive to say someone is obese or even say someone has obesity. And I personally think we should not normalize something that is just a description of someone who is struggling with their metabolic health in a sense. I don't think that that's something that we should say is okay, and I definitely don't think that we should normalize it in teenagers because that's just offsetting their entire future because I mean, obesity is projected to replace smoking as the number one preventable cause of cancer. Obesity has ties, we all know, to type 2 diabetes, all of these other kinds of things. And I'm just like, I have no hate towards any kinds of people. And I don't think judgment is the answer. I think that we should always approach other people with love, but I don't think that you're loving someone if you're not helping them by helping them get healthier and better. And it's definitely a tough topic to talk about. And I definitely struggle trying to think of how to best communicate it. But I mean, when adults are the ones who are pushing this on teens, that bothers me, especially when they're saying, okay, just take Ozempic. And yes, Ozempic in some cases, I think is better than bariatric surgery and these other things. But it's also like, why don't we talk about food first? Why don't we talk to our kids about that first? And parents are okay with their teens doing these things. And it really, really frustrates me. Yeah, the whole approach to it right
Yeah,
now.
it's a hard balance. I think we have to have compassion. We all struggle. We all have our
Yeah,
shortcomings. And I think it's the same way I would look at smoking. Like you don't
yeah,
glorify smoking when you know there's health
no,
consequences of that. You don't go, this is great, everyone should smoke. You say, well, can we cut down from a pack a day to half a pack? Would that work for you? And like, what can we do to get started on a road to
exactly.
being better? And the dose is the poison to some degree, but then the big problem that we miss, I think, in nutrition and lifestyle and all these things is, look, if someone is addicted to something, and if we have highly addictive foods, you can't tell them to do it in moderation when they can. Other people can. If you're metabolically healthy, you go, yeah, I had half a cookie
Yeah,
and
you're
I'm
like,
done.
I can have a cupcake yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's different than someone who goes, I have half a cupcake and I end up in the gutter eating all the cookies in the world right now. And so people don't realize that there's true addiction, but also that when you glorify and say it's great, I'm seeing it being glorified more rather than saying, hey, we're gonna love you and we're gonna help you try to get a little bit healthier.
Exactly. Totally a strange kind of glorifying of it. Yeah.
One, especially when you're seeing young people with these chronic inflammatory diseases, and I really do think our mental health struggles are we're at an epidemic of mental health
Oh my gosh.
crisis right now, and
Yeah.
especially in young people with suicide and drug abuse and all these things. And you can say, well, once if your nutrition and your exercise and your sleep and all these things get better, does it make you less likely to need those things to cope with life?
Precisely. Yeah, and this whole mental health awareness thing, I mean, yeah, it's good, but I mean, I'm a fan of Dr. Chris Palmer, so I I love his work.
Yeah,
And
me too.
I'm like, why are we not spreading metabolic health awareness? If there's we keep separating the brain from our body, but I mean, there's so much research on. I read one study that blew my mind recently was on the offspring of mice, and it showed that when you fed them reheated seed oils, they basically had visible neurodegeneration. And that was crazy to me. And we've also seen past studies that show these reheated oils, are connected to anxiety and these other kinds of illnesses. So it's like, it's not just a separate thing. And I mean, teens are handed out SSRIs and all these kinds of things just like it's candy. They're like, yeah, oh yeah, you have ADHD, you have blah, blah, blah. Let me just give you this and let's be done here. Instead of let's see what you're eating every day. I bet you're going to bed at 12 p.m. on TikTok. Like, let's fix some habits here, And it's not like adults aren't aware of that too. I mean, what do you think, Brian? I feel like most adults know that teens are struggling.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing. It's almost like we have our head in the sand or we don't see it. I mean, as a doctor, I see it all. So
Yeah.
most people just don't realize like the huge effects. And I think the bigger thing for me, Hal Cranmer's a friend of mine down here in Arizona, and he's doing stuff with seniors, and he's taking seniors with advanced dementia and he's changing their lifestyle, getting them on a nutritious diet rather than, like you talked about in the show, they're putting them on, seed oil and sugar and think that's going to help our seniors get better. And when they change their diet, they use Health Code, which is one of the sponsors of my Life's Best Medicine podcast, and they're showing huge improvements in these seniors because they want that sweet taste because that's what's ingrained in them. And we have studies showing that people with dementia crave sugar like crazy. Like if you give them a ton of foods, they'll take the sugary foods because they're trying to get their brains to work. It's a last ditch effort to try to really raise those sugars to get to the brain. But once if you run on ketones, once you run on a different fuel source, does that help the brain to function better and decrease inflammation in the brain? And just going back to the stuff like the nastiness we see on social media, where they don't like your eyebrows, right? They don't care about the content of what you're saying. It's just
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
But you see how many of those people, their brains are just fried because they're having these mood swings up and down with sugars and hormones and cortisol and all
Totally.
this kind of stuff.
Yep. No, glucose spikes every single day, first thing in the morning. Yeah, and I also have been kind of thinking on, I really want to get teens excited about things like the low carb diet, ketogenic diet, these things that just will increase their productivity, even if they're not interested in the health benefits. Like you said, getting on ketones, I personally am on the ketogenic diet, and it has improved my focus so much. Like it's insane. And even just the occasional intermittent fasting, it helps me so much. And so yeah, I really think getting teens to, whether it be like wear glucose monitors that we have a lot of now, or measure their ketones, like that's kind of exciting, cool stuff. If they're interested in, okay, how can I really set myself up best to ace my test tomorrow? Or how can I show
Yeah.
up best today at my track tournament? These typical high school experiences can be enhanced by committing to eating healthier.
No doubt about it. We see athletes, and when they eat healthy and they take care of themselves and they get their sleep, they do better. If they're out partying until 3 in the morning and then they want to perform the next day, it's going to affect performance. Same in school, and so many kids are diagnosed with ADD, because they can't pay attention. And how much of that is nutrition, lifestyle, stressed
Totally.
out at home? Parents are divorced
Yeah.
and conflict. All
Yeah.
these things that we're seeing, and so that's over the last year and a half or so. I've really focused on the effects of stress on everything.
Yeah.
Cancer, on
Yeah.
diabetes risk, and all these things, and mental health issues, and so it's all a big picture. So
It
out of
is.
these five big things, what can we adjust in ourselves to make ourselves? Some people don't struggle with sleep, but they struggle with whatever, substance abuse, or so it's trying to figure out how do I best manage what we have to work with, basically.
Totally.
So what's your passion now? What do you think? Like going to college, you're getting ready for college and all that kind of stuff. I mean, do you want to, is your area like uh film and editing and all this kind of stuff, or was that just a means to get your message out?
I think it was just a means to get my message out, but I'm definitely interested in continuing to pursue it to keep getting the same message out. And like I said earlier, I mean, I'm on a mission, and I really want to see the curve of cancer cases flatten by 2040. Like that is my goal. And I think the way to get there is by helping my generation. And so I plan to just keep going after that and keep learning and growing and researching. And I mean, I love biochemistry, like everything about it is so fascinating to me. So learning more about that in college, yeah, and just continuing to get this message out until we see some change. So I definitely will keep you in the loop.
Yeah, I mean, are you considering medicine as a career, or is that not really on your radar, or are you more on the
Yeah.
creative side?
Everyone asks me that, and it's funny because maybe I would say before my whole journey of how I got here, I would say yes to that, except now that I've spoken to so many doctors who have told me like, oh, what I learned in med school did not help me with what I'm trying to teach now about, how to actually have good metabolic health and stuff like that. And the fact that I've also read, that it's crazy how little time they spend just talking about nutrition, like 2 to 11 hours a day. It's these crazy numbers like that where I'm just like, I'm a little concerned that I would not be very in alignment with what they're teaching me. Although I love the idea of continuing to refine and learn more on the health side of things, just kind of what I think standard medicine stands for. I think I'm a little bit on the opposite spectrum now.
Yeah, I totally get it. And like someone like you, I know how it was in residency when people ask questions, the professors didn't like that. The doctors doing rounds, I go, why don't you just do it this way? And they'll go, no, it's done this way. And it's just medicine is such a hand-me-down
Yeah.
profession in that they go, this is the way we've always done it, this is the way we're going to do it. And there's the people who like you question, go, wait, this doesn't make sense. We're giving people a ton of sugar, and then we're giving them insulin to get rid of the sugar we're giving them. Does that make sense to you? And they go, yeah, that's how you do it. That's how it works. And you're like, well, it doesn't make
Well,
sense, does it?
doesn't
Like
make sense. Yeah.
if you're allergic to peanuts, I don't give you a bunch of peanuts and they give you the antihistamine so you don't get
Yeah.
alert. I just go, don't eat peanuts if you're allergic to it. So it's just amazing when someone thinks logically how, and that's a sad part. I think my fear of AI is that so many doctors will just type in
It'll take.
that and they lose that personal touch and they become a computer now, just saying, okay, here's your diagnosis. Not okay, how do we prevent this from happening? How do we fix this problem?
Yeah, no, continuing to learn how to think critically is super important. And I think that the people who are using AI the best right now are the people who are most familiar with how to use it as a resource to accelerate them in whatever they're doing, but not use it as a means to just all of their knowledge, like having it all come from that. I mean, we were taught in school how to fact check AI and go back and forth to ChatGPT, refine your prompt, do all these kinds of things because it is a super powerful tool that I think a lot of people, it's important that we know how to use. But even what you were saying about how we treat chronic diseases, it's crazy to me because I feel like the biggest thing that I've noticed is that we are treating chronic diseases as if they are acute conditions or some of the older kind of things that medicine was trying to fix. So like when you think of germ theory and how penicillin was introduced kind of earlier on in like the second age of medicine, that was all super important because we were treating these acute things that people were coming in for, and those were causes of death. But then once our diet got derailed and, we also stopped exercising as much, these kinds of things, it's like we're keeping that mindset, but we have completely different issues. So that also makes no sense to me because we clearly, in my mind, have entered the third age of medicine, which is that we need prevention, early detection, and we need lifestyle intervention, those kind of three things. And so we're not really getting there yet. We're kind of staying in this old way of medicine when we're not even treating the same things.
Well, that's the eye opener for me. That's what was so hard for me to really, really grasp onto, because I didn't want to believe certain things. Like, Professor Tim Noakes, when he came out talking about low carb, he got attacked and he had to go through 3 years of trial because he's saying don't eat cereal for breakfast, basically, right?
Yeah.
So you go, wait a minute. What he's saying is what he sees, and when you change your diet, the sugars get better. But the problem is when the education is coming top down from industry, you're captured because the data, no one's gonna like for low carb, for like until recently, using keto or low carb for mental illness, like no one would. Who's gonna fund it?
Yeah.
Who's gonna fund that? Because there's no benefit to people by saying don't eat processed food and sugar or
Yeah.
seed oils, and so you're going against industry, and then they're gonna badmouth you and attack you forever because that's where they're getting their finances from, and you're attacking them. It's just like the cigarette companies. How long do we know it caused cancer before they actually said, yeah, it causes
Oh
cancer?
my
For
gosh.
40
Exactly.
years.
Yeah, 30 years. And we can't have that again. We can't have that, especially when we have social media now to be able to spread messaging. Like yeah. I
Yeah,
don't.
and like you said, you having to go on this podcast, Life's Best Medicine got taken down 4 times for medical misinformation, for all things that were factually correct, talking to other doctors about what we
Wow.
were seeing. And how do you call it factually incorrect when you haven't looked at our records or our charts to see what we're seeing, what we're now all these things are coming out as true, and you go, well, gosh, if people would have listened 2 years ago or 3 years ago to the things we were seeing on the front lines,
Yeah.
then and just today it came out there was a doctor who was attacking a bunch of other doctors. She never even went through training. She got her MD degree but never treated a patient
Oh my
yet.
gosh.
And she's
Oh
saying
my
how
gosh.
everyone else is, and you look and they go, how can we have and publish in the major medical journals and major industry news, and you go, you haven't even treated a patient yet, and you're criticizing all these doctors who are saying what they're actually seeing. So when you start seeing, and why does this person get propagated all the
Yeah.
way up? And she just did a mea culpa last week and saying, oh yeah, I shouldn't have attacked all these people. Well, now it's too late.
Oh my
Now it's
God.
too
Yeah.
late,
Yeah.
and
No.
so it's a hard thing where, I think it's just such a hard part of medicine. I think that's, we've learned a lot of educated, as I got my gray hairs, I started learning it, like, why would it be like this? It doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. But the more you're around, the more you realize that we're kind of captured as a society, really, because
Yeah.
when it comes to like these experts know, like, better than the experts. Like, I think I do, because I know what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's what you're seeing, is a bunch of sick people around you, young people that are like, what's their future when they're 40 or 50? You
Exactly.
know?
No, it's crazy. And yeah, even, and it, at first I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy that it's like in America, we're like a developed country and this is happening to us when other countries are already trying to manage these things. Like you see in Africa and South America, they're coming out with these new kinds of regulations for ultra processed foods. But even there, these big food conglomerates are massive. They're global and they're impacting all of the scientific information that we have coming out surrounding these issues. From like promoting ineffective corporate self-regulations. It's like literally this study that I read, it was saying stuff like that, spyware, threats, all these kinds of crazy things. You're like, what is happening? This is just talking about health. And we're getting down
Yeah.
spyware now to try to fight against one mom who's saying, I don't like that high fructose corn syrup is in Coca-Cola. These kinds of crazy things where it's like, what is going on?
Yeah, it is wild. And that's the scary part, is that, I think it's self-preservation for a lot of people. That if you're the president of this corporation, it's hard to say, yeah, my product's hurting people. And that the other thing that happens in the United States is we're the beacon of hope, basically. So when we come
Yeah,
up with our nutrition guidelines, everyone says, well, the US must know what they're doing, so we'll just follow what
yeah.
they're saying. So everyone just kind of doesn't do their own research and just kind of, the FDA says something and it's, oh, the FDA approved, okay, then it's healthy. Well, how many
Mhm.
things have been taken off the market that were FDA approved because they were killing
Exactly.
people,
Yeah.
right? Years later, after the money was made, and you go, oh my gosh. And then these guys start working for pharma, and you see this revolving door, and you think, oh my gosh, like, what is happening to our system? And when you question it, you're a conspiracy theorist, instead of saying, wait a minute, here's what we're seeing. So yeah, there's a lot of problems we have to work on, but I'm so glad that you're doing your part in getting the message out. So tell
Thank you.
people where they can find it. Is it only on X, or is it on other platforms?
So it's exclusively on X as of right now. I do have plans though to release it on YouTube too, and then kind of segment it out and do some stuff on TikTok. That'll be fun, but that'll be a little bit more for teens. Unless you're an adult on TikTok, that's also cool. But that is kind of my plan. But for right now, you can find me on X at Traveling Jeans with one G. So it's like Travelin Jeans. And yeah, I'm very excited. If you see it, leave a comment because I love to see all the comments.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, I really enjoyed it. So everyone listen to it. It's a great job. Thomas Seyfried, all the great ones are on there. People who I respect a lot that I've interviewed or talked to. And so Callie Means is doing some, I mean, he has a lot of insider information from that side of the other
Huge
side of the
insider information.
argument. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's something. But so now I gotta ask you, what's life's best medicine for you? Like, what gets you going? What motivates you? Where do you go when things are hard? You're going through struggles in life. Like, what keeps you going?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll have a two-way answer for this because when it comes to just medicine in general, like what is life's best medicine, I do think that food is one of the best medicines. And I feel like I need to say that too because my whole message is all about changing the way that we eat. But specifically when it comes to medicine for kind of the soul and my heart, I am a firm believing Christian. And so I always go back to Christ and the word in the Bible. And so that has really gotten me through a lot of these very scary kind of things that I've had to do for my project. I just continue to go back to my faith and I just continue to trust in him because he has a plan for me. And so I hope that I can continue to help others ultimately.
Wow, that's awesome. And funny enough, that's the other reason I did this podcast, Low Carb MD. If I talked about faith or God, it became a big issue. People just talk about low carb. We don't want to hear about that. I go, well, a lot of us deal with life that way, and that makes life better for us. And that's our life's best medicine. Like when things go really bad, you okay, God, you're in control here, right? So,
Exactly.
hearing that over and over, and one of the biggest kicks I've had from friends and acquaintances or people on social media, they go, how can you be a doctor and believe in God? I'm like, how can I be a doctor and not? And the more I'm around, the more I realize our body is not designed to kill us. Like
No.
we look at it and go, okay, why do we get fat? Because we have a choice. We can either get fat or we can get diabetes. Why does this happen? Well, because it's oxidizing the the cholesterol, whatever it is, and you realize our body's trying to help us despite our dumb stuff we do, right? Like there's some
Yeah.
grace in our body that we can heal. And the more you see the intricacies of the human body and the physiology and how it all balances, you go, wow, how can there not be a God?
Totally. I completely agree with you.
So it's awesome. We don't check our intellect or our, so many times people go, well, you just believe this fantasy. And I think it's really important that we have these discussions. So some of the most intellectual people I know are people of faith, right? And when I just had a
Same. Yeah.
engineer on, and he goes, everyone's just atheist because that's what they said you had to be. And then I started thinking, let me analyze this. And he
Yeah.
started going through the data, and he started realizing, oh my gosh, like there's something to this.
Wow.
So it is really cool because we don't check our intellect at the door. We still question, and that's how cults happen if you don't question. And it may
Exactly.
be the same with AI. If I believe
Yeah.
them blindly without saying, well, let me do my own research and talk to people who know this field, we have to balance it. And so that's what I love about you bringing the balance of these things. Like we have to have balance. We can't just trust AI. We can't just go to Wikipedia and think that's truth.
Yeah.
We have to say, okay, what's my life experience? What's the background of these people? And really questioning is so important, and it's frowned upon in our society. That's why when I first heard about you, I was like, man, she's questioning everything, and at a young age.
Yeah.
Amazing. It's dangerous to some people, but
Yeah.
to the rest of us, go, we just want the truth. Show us both sides and let us decide. I think that's what we're talking about with censorship and all these important things that we've talked about in this last hour. So yeah, I wish you the best, and I'm going to be keeping an eye out for what you come up with down the road, and anything I can do to help or provide a platform, let me know. But great job, everyone. Go to X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and check out this documentary. It's definitely worthwhile, and so many of us are struggling with cancer, and
Yeah.
or we're going to get cancer. So we
Mhm.
think, how can we do whatever we can to prevent that from happening?
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you so much, Brian, for having me. This has been amazing.
Yeah, amazing. And thank you so much for your hard work and putting all that effort in. And I have to ask you just before we go, did you do all the editing? Did you have help with that? Or
I did have help with the execution of the editing, but I was there throughout the whole process, helping decide
clipping,
what was
cutting, and
going
doing
to get
that?
organized.
That's
Yeah.
amazing, because I know I've edited stuff and it's like it's it's really
Mind-boggling. Oh, yeah.
challenging. You get the soundtrack off a little bit, and this gets messed up, and it's like,
Oh, totally. Yeah. No, and I think my computer would have crashed if I actually had all the editing tools on here. So I'm grateful for that.
yeah, that's awesome. But awesome work. So thankful for that. And keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Hey, and everyone, this is why we did the podcast. We talked about a lot of different things, and I'm thankful to my sponsors who make this possible, and just working to make people healthier and better. And so, sometimes just say, hey, is this genetic, or is there something I can do about it? Can I be less stressed? Can I be nicer to people? Can I smile a little bit more and relax on the beach every now and again? Do things that really give your life meaning, whether it's faith, whether it's yoga, meditation, whatever it is. Just find that meaning in life. And thank you for listening. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Have a great day.